Hello, everybody. Sorry I was a few minutes late. I was reading through all the questions you guys submitted. I've we've got a bunch, so we still need to go over from um, last session, and a bunch more submitted for today. But I want first, really quickly, we have some really great stuff to talk about today. We're talking about we've got some neurodiverse partners asking about love languages. We got some folks asking about whether or not men hide when they get overwhelmed emotionally, when there's conflict, even with other people. Lots of good stuff. So, hi, Jean. Hi, Rianne. Good to see you guys today. Um, but first, I wanted to just tell you guys what this is right here. It's on this side. If you're not on my email list or in my Facebook group, this is the next 6 week coaching group that I'm running for you guys. I usually run these about once a quarter. It's been a hot minute since I ran the last one because I've been so busy, pretty much revamping this whole program. So this is the first coaching group I've run in several months, and it will be next year before we run the next one. So this is step 4 in Crack the Communication Code. But because I'm launching this whole new revamping of this program, you guys get to skip the line if you haven't done steps 1 through 3 yet. And we're going to automatically give you steps 1 through 3 when you register for step 4. And this coaching group, you guys, is the bomb, as a lot of the teenagers would say. The folks who have gone through this have just, it's so cool to be on my side of it. So many of them have said this was a game changer, saved my marriage. If you didn't see my live with Michelle a few weeks ago, she talked about what it was like for her and her husband, Dave, to go through this program. So anyway, early bird ends this Friday at midnight, and that's what this ticker is, right? Oh, I can't point to it. Right there. After that, registration enrollment closes on Monday. So the price goes up a good bit. And if you have already started uh, steps 1 or step 2, or even step 3, check your email, because you should have gotten an email from us today with, you get a little bit of an extra coupon code as well, in addition to the early bird. So I want to see you guys there. It's my favorite thing to do in this whole coaching program. So we'll be meeting Wednesdays at 4 p.m. Eastern. You can watch the replay if you can't come live. So I hope to see you guys there. And we do have 2 bonus calls too on Mondays. Hey, Clara, good to see you. I made somebody smile when I said the bomb. Yeah, I learned all this terminology from my teenagers, you guys. Okay, I don't want to waste too much more time on this, though, because let me go ahead and take that banner down. Because you guys have a ton of questions for me today. And so if you have questions that you want to ask here live, Amber is helping me keep track of that. But I'm going to get started with the folks that we didn't even get to last time. And we're streaming today to YouTube and the Facebook group and the Facebook page and LinkedIn. So wherever you are, say hello. All right. Okie doke. Let's see. So we're going to start with someone who she sent this email in, and I'm looking over here at my other screen. And so she's talking. Now this is a really important question, because she's talking about she's the NT neurotypical partner, and she's in a relationship with a guy who's neurodiverse, and they've been together for a while. But he sometimes goes into what she calls dark times. This is the word she's using. And she said it sometimes can last every other week or so. Sometimes the big ones are less frequent. But she describes him as basically just going into this real shell of darkness where he struggles to interact. She struggles to get to him or to get through to him during those moments. And he has actually told her, she said, I'm just going to quote what she said. She said, my own partner said that the worst part is when he's in the downtime, he can't get out of it. And it's just stuckness. And that when he is out of that they're able to talk about it, and that he is very much able to connect and talk about it. But that he even says that when he's in it, it just consumes him. And she said she really struggles to even try to connect with him when he's in these dark places, because he's in such a negative space, and even it carries over toward her, and he can even be just kind of cruel and mean during those times. um, and he's told her that there's really nothing that can make it better, because the negativity about everything, including himself, is what consumes his brain when he's in it. Now, she asked him if he preferred her attention while he's in this dark place. And he said, um, I don't want you there, but if you leave, I'll feel worse. And she said, you know what? It really does get worse if I withdraw. And she said, it's like he has a lot of trauma and abandonment triggers. And she said, when she withdraws or just kind of leaves him be, that it triggers kind of those abandonment wounds, and it just makes things worse for him. So she's saying, what in the world do I do about this? And so I'm glad that she asked about this, because there are two things that I see here, and one is depression. Now, I'm not in the business of diagnosis anymore. I am a trained therapist, but I am seeing some what sound very much to me like depressive episodes. Now, she mentioned some people had mentioned bipolar, which, if you're not familiar, that can be that's when we swing from one extreme to the other, and it's not when you're just moody. It's not that, but it's when our bodies and our brains go from one extreme to the other, from depression to mania. And so that's one thing that absolutely could be going on here. But as Clara just said in the comments, um, shutdowns can really look like depression. So what may be happening is it's an overwhelm that pushes him into a complete shutdown. And what is sounds to be, our brains and our psyche pairs things. So you guys, there's never just one thing going on. It's not ever just autism or just depression or just executive functioning. We are complex human beings. So we have many things going on at once. And this gentleman has a significant history of trauma and some abuse and some neglect and abandonment there. So that is a layer that is present here as well. So what's happening is he may be becoming overwhelmed from a sensory standpoint, point. Sorry, you guys. Executive functioning, which is his tasking and organizing and planning skills. If there's a lot going on in his life, then he may be reaching a point of it's like a traffic jam in the brain. But when he associates her with someone who cares for him, and he's had abandonment issues in the past, and she does say that he's working through a lot of that in therapy, the psyche, the mind, automatically pairs her retreat, her kind of backing off. It triggers those abandonment wounds as well. And so, what can this couple do? It sounds like they're already doing some things right. He is getting some treatment for the depression. He's getting treatment for the trauma that he's had. Let me take this ticker off there. Sorry, guys. So you guys are already, if you're on the live today, you're already doing some things right. Now, I want to speak to both of you, both partners. So hopefully you can share this, or if you can relate to this. One of the things that when someone is in this absolute dark place, we need to do things that ground us. And so he said his mind is consumed with negativity, and the autistic brain can perseverate, which means it gets stuck like a broken record on something just playing over and over again. So if he's stuck with these negative thoughts looping, then he needs to do things, or you, if you're listening, that ground you and help your brain to stop that loop. So, for example, when we get a song stuck in our head that won't go away, it's helpful to play a different song, or to sing, or to use some other modality that forces our brain to do something else. So when he's stuck in these negative thoughts, he can do something that requires him to it grounds him in some way physiologically. So exercise, we know, can help ground our bodies and our central nervous system, which can help us abort that negative thinking. And he can also intentionally think about something else. So in other words, he may want to plan ahead. Planning ahead can be really helpful in this situation. Have a go-to something that he enjoys. Have it planned ahead. Have a note saved on his phone or his computer that says, do this if you go dark. And it needs to be something that doesn't reinforce the negativity, some kind of activity, some type of experience, something that forces his brain to think about something else. So that's those are some tips for him. For her, she, first of all, cannot take responsibility for these moments with him. As much as we love our partners, we cannot do this for them. And when our partners are in this dark space, so many of us, even neurodiverse people, want to help their neurotypical partners, or neurodiverse want to help neurotypical partners. Or I said that wrong. You guys know what I'm saying. We can't take responsibility and we can't own that. And so she's in those moments, she can give him, they can come up with hand signals or one word statements to let him know she's not leaving, but that she's taking a break. So, or that could even be it. That could be the phrase, I'm not leaving, but I'm taking a break. I'm not leaving, but I'm taking a break. If he can't process words, literally come up with a hand signal, guys. I love hand signals, or have a image that you guys have agreed on, like a little GIF or GIF or whatever you guys call it, that she can send to him that they know in advance. This is my signal to you. I'm not leaving, but I'm taking a break. Claire has a really good she's on YouTube, you guys. She has a good suggestion here in the comments to engage in a special interest. And that really is a great idea, especially if that special interest is something that the brain is easily able to go to. That's a great distraction technique. All right. So let me move on to the next question. I see Chrissy, you've got a question. I'm going to get to the ones that have been emailed in last session first before I start fielding questions here on the live. All right. Okay, so we have another question. She says, is it typical of someone on the spectrum to have a hard time letting go of a relationship and moving on after it's over? Okay, so here's the thing. Neurodiversity, autism is about extremes. So what we see is the traits of neurodiversity, the characteristics show up at the extreme of, and it's not all traits, but some of the traits show up at extremes. So in the neurotypical population, we have people who struggle to let go. We also have people who are able to just move on. So in the neurodiverse population, we see both, but in any given individual, they may be at one extreme or the other. So you may have one person who's on the spectrum that is able to just end it and walk away and be fine. And that may seem so callous to the person who was in the relationship with them or to anybody else who's observing them. And it may seem like they didn't really care. I actually had a man on the spectrum say to me one time when his fiance died, and he told me, he said, well, I grieved for about a month and then I moved on because she's dead. What can I do? And I thought, wow, that sounds so callous. It sounds like he wasn't very emotionally invested in her. The thing is, I know he was, but he was very literally thinking, I can't do anything about this. Now that's a death. Same when a relationship ends, though. And it doesn't mean that an individual wasn't really highly invested, but it's like a door closes. And once that door closes, it's shut. Now, on the other end of that spectrum, or to that other end of that extreme, you may have someone who struggles to let go of that relationship, struggles to end it, struggles to perceive it as over, struggles with the change in routine because a relationship brings about the routine. When my relationships have ended in the past, uh, neurotypical and neurodiverse, one of the hardest things for me was the change of the routine of someone being in my life. And as we know, routine and structure is very important to a lot of folks on the spectrum. So it may be very difficult for some people to let go. And for those folks, it's these tactics that we were talking about with the question about distraction, diving into special interests, anything to distract the brain and the psyche and the mind into not focusing, not hyper focusing on that relationship ending can be very helpful. All right, so let's see. I see a couple of comments here or questions for me that we'll get to in a little bit. All right, so next question from someone from a couple weeks ago. I think this is our last one from a few weeks ago. So her question was really long. So you guys, I'm going to try to summarize this. So she's neurotypical and she's dating a man who's neurodiverse for about a year. And so they are both divorced, have kids, but they live about an hour away from each other. And so they can only see each other about once a week. And she says, when we're together, it's really great. And she said, I love spending time with him. But when we're apart, there's little to no communication. She said, I really feel like out of sight, out of mind. And he may go a day or two without even being in touch with me at all. And it seems like I'm not on his mind at all. And so that's one issue. And the other issue, she says, is that he doesn't want to stay over. He doesn't want to spend the night. She said, we've only done this a couple of times when we went on trips together. She said, I know he's capable of this, though, because he's done it in previous relationships. And when I ask him about our relationship, he says that it's because of his OCD and he doesn't want to be weird. So she goes on to say that he's told her that their relationship doesn't feel like it's going to progress organically because he doesn't know how to take it to that next step. And she's saying, well, I know that this is going to fall on me to push it into that next step. And then she also shares that he's had an ex-wife who left the relationship, a girlfriend that left the relationship. And something that I really want to point out that she says, I'm going to quote her here. She says, so I know I need to be the one to initiate the tough conversations, and I'm just not sure how. And she says, I'm not sure if he's just being ultra guarded with me or if he just doesn't care about me the way I care about him. He doesn't tell me how he feels about me. Okay. So basically, there are a couple of what I would call possible red flags here. Let's go back to the out of sight, out of mind. So I wouldn't call this a red flag, but this is something that I definitely see in long distance relationships that are neurodiverse. I also see them in up close and personal relationships. And so neurotypical partners have told me quite a lot that when their partner is not with them, whether they're at work or at an event or out of town for work, that there's not a whole lot of interaction. And I can remember working with one couple in my private coaching program, and this neurodiverse husband, they were working with me, and I knew that he loved his wife tremendously, but he traveled a lot for work. And in our private coaching, it was the first time that he actually realized that she expected and wanted to hear from him every day. And to him, he didn't love her any less, but he literally didn't understand that that was what she expected and hoped for and wanted. And she struggled to say out loud, hey, I want to talk to you every day. She was looking to him to just know that and expecting that in a relationship, it's what you do. So she was feeling hurt and unloved and uncared for because had a very passive communication style, and some folks fall into the trap of thinking, well, if I have to ask, it doesn't count. Not so, you guys. Not so in any relationship, and definitely not so in a neurodiverse relationship. So it may be that this woman's partner doesn't realize that she wants to hear from him. And so a conversation needs to be had about that. The other thing, though, that I want to move on to the possible red flags is that she's telling me he has actually had previous relationships where he slept over and he what I would call invested more in the relationship. Something that she is doing, though, that I really want to warn you all not to do, and it's something that neurotypical partners, and especially neurotypical women, we tend to try to figure out what's going on with our partner. And what happens is we create a narrative that may not be true, but we try to figure it out instead of having those conversations. So she says, um, I don't know how to initiate the tough conversations. And she actually said, I don't want to have these tough conversations when he's with me because I don't want to ruin that time that we have together. But then when he goes back home, there's very little communication. So here's the thing, got to talk about it. And so you have to talk about it. You have to have these conversations. And so she is worried and concerned about bringing those things up, and she's already projecting that it's going to go badly. That's why she's afraid of it. The thing is, if a relationship is to progress, is to grow, these things have to be discussed. They have to be brought up. And her wishes, her these I call them requests, bids. I take that from John and Julie Gottman. It's not my own. We talk about this in the communication coaching group that I told you about at the beginning of the call. When we want something from our partner, we have to ask for it. We have to make it known. And then it's up to them to honor that request. And they may not right away because they may not know how. But it's up to we have to take ownership of saying out loud what's missing for us, what we want, what we need. And we don't have to do that in a negative way. We don't have to bring it up like, oh, there's this problem I need to talk to you about. We just have to say, hey, you know what? I really want to talk to you more. And maybe she has, I don't know. But if she has asked for this and he's still not following through, then it's important, it's necessary to say, hey, I'm curious why. Curious is a key word, you guys, because it's a non-critical word. I'm curious why we're still, you don't seem to engage in more conversation with me, but between when we're not together. Has to be had. And but she says, she goes on to say, I think I read this already. Um, I'm not sure if he's just being ultra guarded with me because of these other women who have left him, or if he just doesn't care about me in the way I care about him. So there's that narrative. There's where she's trying to figure it out. And instead of just having the conversation, it is dangerous, you guys, dangerous to have these narratives in our mind, to have these to try to figure out what's going on and to create scenarios. And I have so many women say, and I say women because we are the worst, but men do this too, say, well, I think maybe he feels afraid, and that may come up here in another question. I think I want to say that we cannot assume, because here's the thing, when we're in neurodiverse relationships, we think about life differently. We process life differently. We have different things that motivate us. This is true of neurotypical relationships too, but especially neurodiverse, because we just have different ways of doing life and processing the world. So if I, as a neurotypical, try to project onto a neurodiverse partner what I might be thinking and feeling when I behaved or did something the way they are, I can be completely off base and wrong about that because I'm coming from a neurotypical way of thinking. So it's so dangerous to try to figure it out. Talk about it. And if you don't know how to talk about it, that is what this communication program is all about, you guys. I want to see you there. All right. Let me go back here. Claire is saying about the previous question. I believe maybe autistics tend to leave relationships having preceded the end, or I think you're saying maybe anticipated the end during the relationship. So it's a loss process before the literal ending. Yeah. So I think Claire's trying to say that the end is it's that some people see it as being over or doomed before it actually ends. And so once the ending happens, once they get there, it's easier to walk away. Yeah. And you know what? That's actually not just an autistic trait. People in general do that, especially avoidance. And sometimes anxious attachers, but more avoidance. Let's see. Benjamin is saying, I have autism. Getting over harm from someone is incredibly hard and it leaves you with the persecution. And so you may be referring to what we were just talking about when two other folks left. And yes, it does. It is very hard to get over harm when someone else has done that to us. It's hard for everybody, but it's absolutely hard for folks with autism. And so there's fear about putting ourselves out there again and being vulnerable. But those conversations need to be had to identify, to be able to say out loud and share with our partner what we're experiencing. Is it fear? Is it that I'm just not invested in you as much? What is it? Juana says, person on the spectrum here. By the way, your question's next, I believe. Person on the spectrum here, I do that too. And it doesn't mean I don't think about the person. I do. I just don't feel the need to tell the other person. Okay, yeah, I'm glad you spoke up, Juana, because that's the key. That's part of it right there. And that's what other folks on the spectrum has said to me and to in the coaching groups. They do continue to think about their partner. It's just that prompting to reach out and say hello doesn't actually occur to them, or they don't have that need to do it. Whereas a neurotypical person is that's a more of a expectation in a lot of for a neurotypical mindset, a neurotypical romantic relationship mindset is when I'm away from you, I want to connect with you in some way. But all of us need to have conversations about what we expect. Do we expect to talk every day or every other day? Or do I expect to text with you off and on throughout the day? Or do I expect some phone calls? Because you guys, so many of us go into relationships and we kind of just automatically assume everybody sort of does relationships the same way and that there's a way to do relationships. But even those of us in the neurotypical world, and I say even because this is a focus on spectrum, what I mean by that is this is not necessarily just a neurodiverse issue. Neurotypical partners, the NT partnerships can struggle with the same thing when somebody leaves or travels or is away in the military deployment or something. Because we all have different expectations. And that is stage one of the communication model. Stage one of, not step one, but stage one of communication is what we bring to our relationship, our expectations, our goals, our wishes, our wants. We bring all of that. And until we actually are able to identify and say out loud to our partner, this is what I'm bringing. What are you bringing? We're just trying to interact with all these assumptions and nobody knows whose assumptions are what. We have to talk about it. We have to actually say it out loud. We have to figure it out ourselves first. I can't tell you how many people I've worked with that we talk about stage one of communication. And they're real upset. Both of them are real upset about some interaction they had. And I'm like, what were you bringing to that? What was your expectation of that conversation? And both of them were like, I don't really know how to put it in words. That's the first problem. And that's where we start. We go into these interactions without really bringing to the forefront of our consciousness what we're actually bringing to that interaction, what we're expecting of it, what we're afraid of, what how our values are influencing it, what our beliefs are, even the history of our relationship is part of that interaction. So we have to be aware of it going in, or even if we're not, because you're not going to be all the time. When the problem happens, we need to be able to stop and go back and go, did I bring to that? It's important stuff. All right. Chrissy, I'm so sorry I didn't get to you said that you need to leave for 15 minutes, but we'll watch all this for all responses. I will get to your question here in a bit. Okay, so Claire's saying she's neurodiverse, and that neurodiverse get this all the time, having people think we don't care because we're not good at keeping in touch. Yes, that does happen all the time. My daughter, I talk about her all the time, you guys, poor kid. She's terrible at returning texts. Oh my gosh, she's terrible. But I know she loves me, but yet she's still terrible at returning texts. Hi, 88. Good to see you too. All right. Let's see. I'm going to go on. Let's see. Shirley, you said, Jodi, my friend is on the spectrum. I told him I listened to your cast. He wants to know if I apologized to my ex-husband. I'm curious about what he means about apologizing to my ex-husband, because I don't know if you guys have heard my other video casts about apologies, but I'm not a big fan of apologies, especially not, I mean, from either person. And I'm not trying to get out of an apology here, but I think apologies are only warranted when someone feels truly remorseful. And so, to answer his question, I have actually, the answer is yes. I'm curious what he means about apologizing for what exactly, but the answer is yes. I have actually told my ex-husband that I realize that I brought a whole lot of baggage into our marriage, and that I had no idea what I was bringing to it, and that I see a lot of that now, that I've grown and healed a lot, and that I see a lot of what I brought to it, which contributed to the downfall of our marriage, and that I do feel very regretful and remorseful. However, at the same time, I didn't know what I was doing. It was never intentional to harm him or to harm our relationship. So yes, I have actually. But back to apologies. It's very, very dangerous to expect apologies from other people, because when we expect apologies and we demand them, we are controlling and manipulating another person we're demanding that they feel remorse or that they experience regret. And if that's not what they experience or feel, then it's not going to be an authentic apology. So it's dangerous to go about life expecting those apologies. I'm glad you asked that. That was very intriguing, and I'm always happy to share, you guys. 88 saying, sometimes I think neurotypicals are too tired to have to keep asking. Neurodiverse should pick up some slack if that's something an MT can expect. Let's see. Oh, to keep asking. I think, are you talking about asking about expectations or goals? All we can do is our own part. And when we keep showing up, and I know you've been around long enough to hear me say this, 88. If we keep showing up and we do our part and we share and we request and we ask, and then our partner continues not to, which in some ways they may, I mean, I don't know. We then have to know what our deal breakers are. I keep talking about this. And if we have a request or a desire or a wish or a need that is a 10 on that 2 or 10 scale, Those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, step 1 of Crack the Code, that's my battle busters. If it's a 10, and you have to really ask yourself, it's a 10. I had a client say to me earlier today that something was a 10. She was predicting that a topic was a 10 for her husband. And I asked her, and she has a tendency, she has a trauma history, and those of us with trauma history, and I say us, including myself, tend to rate things a lot higher than they really are. So 7, 8, 9, those are getting up into deal breakers. I asked her, I said, a 10 is a deal breaker. That means I can't live this way. I'm going to leave this relationship. I have to have this. I can't live without this. And this had to do with hanging pictures on the wall, you guys. And I'm like, is that really a 10? Is he going to leave the relationship over this? So we have to know ourselves whether something, where it lands. Is it important enough for us to leave the relationship? And if it is, we have to take responsibility for making that choice ourselves. Okay. Okay, Shirley, you're saying his wife was terrible to him before she knew he was on the spectrum. Okay. Well, the thing is we didn't understand that my ex-husband was on the spectrum until after my divorce, and he still does not believe that he's on the spectrum. It's not a conversation that we can have. I have apologized to him about my part in the downfall of our marriage, but it's not something that he's approachable about, unfortunately, to speak to that. Okay, so yeah, Ben, that's the issue exactly. The pictures being slightly crooked, that is the issue. You nailed it. You knew what was going on there. Um, okay, I want to move to your question from a couple weeks ago before we get too far down the timeline here. You're welcome, 88, about deal breakers. Okay, so she says, do you know some strategies or something that could help us neurodiverse partners, so she's neurodiverse, to stay present and relaxed when being intimate? She says, I'm not sure if it's anxiety or what, but I just can't stop thinking and narrating the whole thing in my brain, so I can't really feel anything. It's really frustrating. So, okay, so we're talking about sexual intimacy, I think, here. And what I'm thinking is you're probably experiencing a sensory overwhelm in those moments. And so your brain just starts. And so what I would recommend is that you really sit, in a moment when you're alone. Imagine being in those intimate moments and stop and think about what kind of things are contributing to overwhelming you. Is light, sound, smells, even tastes? Do you need to put, chew on a peppermint before, or have your partner chew on a peppermint before if like breath smells are bothersome for you? Because what I'm guessing is that your body is overwhelmed. Even the close physical contact can be overwhelming. And some folks find it easier to have the lights off, to have music playing, to have earplugs in. May not look sexy, but if you can concentrate and relax, it's going to be a better experience. So stop and just walk yourself in your mind through an intimate moment with your partner, and imagine what are the things that are influencing you and impacting you in those moments, so that you can block out or accommodate in some way everything that's coming at you, so that you can truly just relax and be in the moment. It may be that some smells and things help, like candles, but for some people that makes things way worse. So know your sensory issues, know your body. And the other thing you might try is some foreplay type for your own foreplay stuff for your own body. Treat yourself to some foreplay, like a relaxing warm bath, or something that will relax you before. And if your partner's like, I want to be spontaneous, you can just say, well, do you want spontaneous or do you want a really great experience? And most people are going to go for the great experience. And spontaneous sometimes can be good. Okay. All right. So let me go back to me scroll back up here in my comments here to Chrissy. She said she had to leave, but I'm going to go back to her. And I do still have more questions that were submitted via email, but let me get to you guys that are live. So Chrissy says, I'm worried my partner is maybe not capable of change. I ask for something, he thinks it's criticism and just totally shuts down. Is change possible if it is literally how his brain perceives things? It looks like pouting, and it's hard to keep trying to understand him when I don't feel the same is being done for me. That helps so much to think of things as presenting extremes. Okay, that was how I answered a previous question. She says it's so hard when you know it but can't feel it that they love you. Okay, all right, so the question of can he change? Well, it depends on what you're talking about changing, because there are certain things that no, your partner absolutely cannot change. I had a client in the Facebook group the other day give an example. Actually, it was the partner who said it helped her understand her partner when she realized that she's colorblind. And so she was talking about those colorblind tests that they use at the eye doctor. It's got the little bubbles and the reds and the greens. She's like, she cannot see. I think it was the red or the green or whatever. She can't see it. And no amount of begging and asking and pleading from anybody else is going to result in her being able to see those bubbles. So if you're talking about certain aspects of your partner's personality traits, whether it's sensory issues or executive functioning abilities, or being concrete and literal, there are just certain ways that our brain processes life that we are just born with. I am, for example, I am not an auditory processor. So if someone tries to teach me by telling me, I don't process it at all. It's my son and I were talking about this the other day. We're both not auditory learners. I cannot change that. And someone who is an auditory learner but not a visual learner can't change that. So those things are not changeable. Now, the things that we can tend to change are the how, like in other words, how to approach a partner, how, what types of words to say, behaviors that are that we want to implement or decrease. We can bring into our conscious awareness, I want to do this differently. Now that takes buy-in and motivation. And so first we have to have ability, and that's that brain we're born with. Second, we have to have willingness. So, okay, I actually agree to do this. And motivation is something that prompts us to actually do, to make a change. So whether or not your partner is willing and motivated or even able, I don't know. So that's something I want you to ask yourself. What is it that you're wanting to see change? Is this a brain wiring thing? And then is there willingness? Which is like, okay, yeah, I want to do this. And is there motivation? Motivation's what? Okay, there's a benefit to this. There's either a benefit or a consequence that's propelling me to go to make this change. That was a great question. Okay, let me scroll down here. Hi, Nathan. Good to see you as always. All right, so Lynette is saying, my husband can't refrain from parenting my teenage daughter, his stepdaughter. He's so certain he's right that I can't get through how my parenting is different. My daughter gets furious if he changes it. Okay, so this is a boundary issue. So she's a teenager. She's your daughter. I'm not sure how long, you haven't said how long you guys have been married. So it would be a bit different if he became her stepfather when she was 1 or 2 years old, and this is the step parent she's grown up with. But if this is more of a blended family situation and he's come on the scene as a stepfather figure more recently, then yeah, there are some clear boundaries there that don't need to be crossed by step parents. But what you're saying is that you know it, your daughter knows it, but he doesn't. He wants to implement discipline to her. And so in that situation, it's important for, it sounds like you have probably had this conversation with him, but you don't want to undermine your husband, but he is actually undermining your authority by going over, superseding some kind of something that you've implemented. And it's okay to say to him, look, when you change a rule of mine or the whatever I determined was appropriate, that is undermining my authority. That's crossing a line. And I don't expect my daughter to adhere to your what you're doing, because that's not your role. And then you're not responsible for his if he gets upset. That's his to own, because this is your daughter. And so you can talk, you might, but before you go to that step, I would encourage you to say, hey, let's talk about this. I'm curious about why you think this is the best way to go about it. But I also need you to listen to me and hear what my perspective is. If he's unwilling to listen to your perspective, then you don't really have an obligation to listen to his, because it's this is your daughter. All right. Juana, I'm glad that was helpful to you. Nathan's saying you're a kinesthetic learner, but more auditory than visual. Yeah, so we're all different learners, different types of thinkers. Okay. You're saying you like me mentioning authority. Of course, it's a little different when it's our sons, but we have to, yes, we do. As partners, we need to listen. That element of curiosity. Neurotypicals do this. We all tend to go into disagreements wanting to prove our own position. That's one of the biggest mistakes couples make. All couples, neurotypical, neurodiverse, whatever you are. We don't go into a disagreement by saying, I'm curious about what you think and why. And then by listening to that and saying, okay, here's what I'm hearing you say, that doesn't mean you're agreeing. It just means you're actually hearing your partner. We can't actually legitimately disagree with somebody until we know what they actually think and feel and why. Think about it. You can know what you think and feel and why and believe, but you can't really say I disagree with you until you've actually investigated and discovered what your partner actually believes and thinks and why. So this is stage 2 of communication. We investigate, we talk to each other. Important stuff, you guys. Okay. All right, another question from the emails, and this one's pretty long too, so I'm going to summarize. So this woman has been in a relationship. They are, I believe, yeah, they're 77, 78 years old. So they're an older neurodiverse couple. Which, by the way, I see all ages here, you guys. I have lots of folks coming to me that are retired. So they had sort of a distant relationship during COVID. They don't cohabitate, and she is saying that he tends to struggle with knowing what actually defines what a relationship is. So while they were together, or she thought they were together, she discovered he's on a dating site, and that was something that didn't go well. She thought he lacked integrity. She told him he lacked integrity. So in her mind, her definition of what they were doing was an exclusive relationship, and she felt he had violated that. But then she goes on to say that he's been in and out of these relationships, that if he goes on a date a few times, he considers it a relationship with somebody. So 2 months in, he's posting a relationship status on Facebook. So he's saying later on that he felt guilt about his failed relationships. And so she's saying it seems like he'll immediately grab on to just about any woman as long as it is quickly. And then here's the danger zone that I was telling you guys about. She said, these things make me think he's afraid to be alone and will get involved with any woman immediately to avoid this. So this is a really good example of someone trying to understand a behavior and then filling in the blanks and think, well, maybe it's this. I think maybe he's feeling alone and afraid. That's you thinking like a neurotypical woman and filling in the blanks of maybe this is what I would do if I felt this way. but it may not be at all what he's doing. It may be that for him, those truly are relationships in his definition of a relationship. We all have different definitions of what relationships are and what they mean. And it doesn't mean that his definition of a relationship isn't problematic and hasn't caused issues for him, but that may actually be his definition of relationship. I've dated somebody for a couple months. We're exclusive. We're not dating anybody else. That's a relationship. Whereas some of us, and I say us, I'm just some people find it necessary to be involved with someone for a longer period of time to develop a foundation. And that's considered more of a long-term relationship. But a lot of folks are comfortable with short-term relationships. So it's important not to try to figure out what this is. So she's saying there's a long history of 3 wives and girlfriends, and she's actually saying, is it characteristic of high-functioning neurodiverse men to be emotionless when ending a relationship, be afraid of being alone, and quickly jump into another one immediately? And so here I'm going to say it depends on the dude. It depends on the woman. And it's not just a neurodiverse trait. There are plenty of neurotypical people who relationship hop, and because of a anxiety about being alone. So is it characteristic of high functioning neurodiverse men? Not necessarily. It may be his thing, but it's not necessarily about neurodiversity. All right, let's see. So Nathan's saying, yep, I wasn't exclusive until at least 3 months in. So I would date multiple people before I was married. All right. Let me move to the next question. It's already almost 6 o'clock, you guys. I'm gonna get through. I have about 3 more. Let's see. 1, 2, 3 more questions that I'm just gonna keep on powering through till we get through all these today. All right, so somebody says, what is the best way to handle your kids being manipulated or gaslighted? Okay, so this is a question so manipulation is something, number one, that we all are capable of. I want to say, and she doesn't ask whether or not this is a neurodiverse person that's manipulating, gaslighting, or neurotypical. And I first want to say that gaslighting is not inherently autistic, is not an autistic or neurodiverse trait at all. And neither is manipulation. However, I do want to say that every single one of us are capable of manipulating and gaslighting. As a matter of fact, we all manipulate. It's not a bad word, you guys. It's bad when it's done for the purpose of controlling someone in power. We all manipulate to try to control our own world at times. We all inadvertently gaslight sometimes because it's our way of dodging, and it's a human trait, not an autistic trait, and not a toxic trait even. But what this person is saying, what do I do when I see my kids being manipulated or gaslighted? So even though this is not a specifically neurodiverse question, I'm going to address this. And what's important to do is to validate your child's reality. So when your child is being gaslighted, which what gaslighting means is when our reality is denied to us. So when we know something was said or done, or we know how we feel, or we know who we are, and someone else is telling us that didn't happen, or that's not what you really think, or that's not how you feel. I know how you feel. I know you better than you know yourself. I know why you really did that. Or I never said that, or you're just remembering that wrong. Those are all gaslighting techniques and strategies that some people use in a very toxic way. And if you see this happening to your children, you want to validate their reality. And one of the best things you can say to anybody is, what do you believe? What do you remember? It's usually not the best to attack's not the right word, but to go after the person who's doing it and try to explain it away, or to say, I don't think they should be doing this. But just ask the person, the child, what do you know is true? What is your truth? What is your reality? You go with that. You go with what you know. And you can say sometimes other people don't understand how to let us have our own reality. And but you know what you know. And that's one of the best things you can say to anybody who's being manipulated or controlled. Uh, okay. All right. So this guy has two questions actually. So he's saying that his wife has noted that aside from physical touch, he's talking about love languages here. That he's always recognized physical touch as his primary love language, but she sees acts of service, so doing things, tasks, as one of his love languages. And he says that kind of was surprising to me because I sort of resent being the person who has to do the household chores, and I want words of affirmation. I want some praise for doing that. So he says he actually feels like words of affirmation is his true love language. So his question is, if the neurodiverse partner, him, sometimes can only show love through tasks and has trouble connecting emotionally to others in the household, is this sometimes the case? So on the one hand, he's saying he feels that physical touch is his love language, but he also likes to receive words of affirmation. Now, Gary Chapman's the one that created love languages, and I'm just going to go with what I know, which I've been following love languages for a while, but typically we tend to give love in the way that we receive it. That's why we call it a language. It's a language we speak. So what I'm seeing here for this fella is that physical touch is something that he enjoys giving and receiving, but that he enjoys receiving words of affirmation, but isn't so great at giving it. But his wife actually sees him as doing things for her. That's one of the ways that she feels loved by him. So I'm actually going to guess that physical touch is probably not high on her love language ranking. Otherwise, she would be receiving some love from him that way. And words of affirmation, maybe, we don't know what her other love languages are, but what she's looking what she's seeing in him is when he does things for her. It may be that acts of service are her love language. And so when he does things for her, she feels loved. So he's asking me, is it oftentimes that folks on the spectrum, that's the most they can do, or that's the best they can do when they struggle to emotionally connect? So I guess that also comes down to how you're defining emotionally connect, because physical touch can be very connecting. If words of affirmation is something that you're if that's how you're defining connection, then it may be that those acts of service are the way it's not really about what you can and can't do. It's about knowing yourself and knowing your partner. So knowing, this is how I feel the most loved. How do you feel the most loved? And then pick two, because sometimes that first top love language is difficult for somebody. Like, I'm not a gifts person. I score 0 on gifts, you guys. And if I'm with somebody, or even have a friend or whatever, that gifts is their top, they're just going to have to learn to get crappy gifts from me, because it's a language I just don't speak. And then they're going to have to tell me what their second love language is, because I can speak the other 4 fairly well. Some of them rank higher than others. But there again, that kind of goes back to how we're wired. And we can't necessarily change it, but we can make behavioral changes based on what our partner needs and wants. Nathan's 0 gifts to. Nuts to you. All right, so his second question was, it's about retreat, like withdrawing. He said, is it typical for a neurodiverse partner to retreat from conflict and hide or numb away from intense emotional conflict, even between others in the household, when it has nothing to do with them? And the answer to that is yes. So he gives an example of sitting on the screen of some sort. locking themselves into a room away from others, putting on headphones, listening to audiobooks. Yes. So the intensity of conflict can be very overwhelming to the sensory system and can set off the fight or flight response in the brain. And so when that's happening, even when the emotional intensity is happening between other people, it's really common for that retreat that I have to get out of this space because my alarm system is going off right now. And so yes, the answer to that is absolutely yes. And not just neurodiverse folks, but folks who other neurotypical folks can actually be overwhelmed by conflict as well. But neurodiverse folks, you guys have that extra layer of sensory processing challenges. So if there's yelling, and your sound, if you're sound sensitive, um, or just lots of words and chaos, that can just really set off those alarms. And so yes, that's absolutely normal and not necessarily a bad thing as long as you come out eventually. And maybe the people who care about you are feeling offended that you retreated. So just shoot them a little text and say, I got to go to my personal space. I'll be out in an hour. Or, when things settle down out there, I'll talk to you guys in an hour or so. Just so they don't feel like you just disappeared. And when they get over their conflict, they can check their texts. Wanda says yes. So she's absolutely relating to this. All right, so here's my last question that was submitted through emails, you guys. And if Amber, can you drop the email address in the comments? Amber's my assistant. She's listening in my ear. So if anybody wants to submit a question for next session, which will be in 2 weeks, just email it to us. So this woman says, my boyfriend engages in what I would call contempt prior to investigation. He will criticize and nitpick when something doesn't go as planned, and he uses assumptive language to describe something I did wasn't the correct thing to do in his mind. So in other words, she's guilty until proven innocent. And she says, I try to defend myself, but I feel like I'm dancing in circles, and I'm not doing that anymore. But internally, I feel really unloved and judged and alarmed. And I'm worried that the relationship is over, which is really uncomfortable. And she says, what is the most powerful thing I can do for myself in the moment when I'm feeling sideswiped and taken off guard? And the last thing she says, and I want to make sure and point this out, she says, I tend to automatically take on the blame, even if I don't show him I'm doing that. So there's a couple of things going on here. So one is her boyfriend is prejudging. And you guys, we all tend to do that. This is not just a neurodiverse trait. We neurotypicals have to own this one too. So we all tend to prejudge. And then when we approach our partner, we approach them in a very critical way. One of the things we talk about in this 6-week coaching group, and I talk about it in the self-study, which is step 3, it's the same curriculum, and you just go through it on your own, is starting our conversations with why did you just, or why do you always, why did you just, why can't you just, not why did you just, why can't you just, I don't understand why don't you, all of these kind of critical type approaches, which is going to shut anybody down. I wish you would, why don't you ever, why don't you never? And so neurotypicals, we approach our partners that way. I mean, I have lots of neurodiverse folks say, I feel criticized all the time. You guys, when I do the comprehensive relationship consultation, I have 3 kinds of consultations you can do with me. One is just we get on the call and talk for an hour. One is a neurodiversity assessment and screening where we go over your relationship issues or just you as an individual. And actually do a neurodiversity assessment to show you kind of where you are on that spectrum. And if it's a couple, I assess both of you to show you where you are in relation to each other. But the third one is a comprehensive relationship evaluation. So we do the neurodiversity screening, but we also, there's a formalized interview online questionnaire that you fill out, and it spits out all these charts and graphs and reports for me that I go over with you. And every time a couple comes to me that's in high conflict, they both score very highly on a subscale called partner dominance. What this means is both of them feel like the other one is highly critical and in control of the relationship. They both feel like the other one is trying to take control of the relationship. They feel dominated by their partner, both of them. And this is what I call being in the boxing ring. They are in the boxing ring, they got the gloves on, and they're constantly either throwing a punch or defending one. This is a problem. So, what she's describing is that her partner's coming at her with boom, he's throwing punches, and he's not taking the time to use an approach that can actually even be heard by his partner. When we come at somebody with a critical approach, we're not nobody's going to be receptive to that. Nobody. Whether you're neurodiverse or neurotypical, nobody's going to be receptive to that. So her boyfriend may or may not ever hear this video, and he may not be interested in changing his approach. She's asking me, what do I do to take care of me? So one of the things that she says is, I tend to take on the blame, whether I say it out loud or not. So that's the first thing. That's the first thing that you do. This is a codependent trait. Codependency is when we are compulsively addicted to taking care of others and to at the expense of ourselves. And so when we take the blame that is not ours, it's a way of trying to fix the situation, trying to fix someone else's anger or upset or whatever by saying, well, if I could have done something differently, then this wouldn't be happening. Even if I just had kept my mouth shut, or if I just, that's where you start. When you're taking on the blame, you stop and go, wait a minute, hold up. Did I actually do something wrong here? Did I intend to do something wrong? Were my intentions poor? Or did I just make a mistake? Maybe I did something wrong, but it was just an honest mistake. And not own anything more than that. And his anger, his rage, his whatever self-righteousness is not yours to absorb. And that boundary, start learning how to set boundaries and say, and literally put a hand up. I like hands. And say, that's not how I see it. Would you like to know my perspective? And if he says no, then conversation is over. When someone is not willing to hear your perspective, you say, that's not why I did that. That's not what I did. That's not how I remember it. That's not my perspective. That's not my point of view. Would you like to hear mine? And you can start with clarifying his and say, you know what, I'm feeling a bit attacked here, but what I'm hearing you say is blah, 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 blah. Are you interested in hearing my perspective? And if someone says, no, I don't want to hear your perspective can't possibly be right. Conversation over. And whatever they're accusing you of, then there's just no credence to it. Those of you who are on the other side of this, if you are recognizing yourself in this and say, you know what, sometimes I just feel so right. And I feel like my partner is so wrong that I really, truly am not open to hearing what they have to say. Then your partner really, truly has no obligation to actually listen to you and hear you. Because when any of us are closed to hearing our partner's perspective, now the caveat there is if our partner is being abusive, if our partner is coming at us and attacking us verbally, emotionally, psychologically, then we don't have any obligation to hear our partner's perspective there. And it's best to just walk away, just to stop, not engage, do not engage in a conversation. Do not defend yourself. Do not try to justify. Do not try to explain. Just, this is when you say, I'm not going to participate in this conversation, and walk away. And then you may follow up later and say, if you'd like to talk to me in a way that you're willing, if you'd like to hear my perspective on this, then I'm interested in talking to you. But if the abuse starts, no one is ever obligated or encouraged to participate in that conversation. Okay. Is it Zoe? I'm not sure how to pronounce that. You're saying, do Asperger's tend to exaggerate in arguments? Do they tend to be negative? They can. It depends on the person. Exaggeration, yes, they can, but also it depends on the person. Some are going to be very concrete and literal and not exaggerate at all, where others may exaggerate based on what their perspective or perception of something. So for them, they may not actually be exaggerating. So, for example, a man that I used to know that he's not in my life anymore, but used to use the words favorite. That's my favorite, or he'd use absolutes like all the time or never. And so, but absolutes are very rarely. There's very rarely anything that's an absolute, an always, or a never. Um, and so it can be confusing. Those terms can be used by folks on the spectrum sometimes because of the differences in the way we use language. And so an always may mean a lot, or a never may mean not very much, or my favorite may mean I really like it versus it's my true favorite. I used to be really confused by him. Actually, he's somebody I dated, and he was on the spectrum. And I get confused because he'd tell me that certain food was his favorite, and I'm like, oh, that's his favorite. And then like the next week, he's like, oh, that's my favorite. I thought you said that was your favorite, and he's like, yeah, or he'd tell me about his favorite song. And anyway, so those exaggerations may be just a different way of using language. So that's something to try to clarify with your partner. All right. Great questions, you guys. It's always a pleasure. Next week, before you go, next week I have a really awesome treat for you guys. It's not a live stream. I do these Q&As every other week. But next week I'm going to be premiering in the same time slot a pre-recorded video chat I had with a couple who have gone absolutely viral on TikTok, and I love these guys. And they are a neurodiverse couple, and they're sharing with the world they just talk about their relationship and talk about the strategies that they use and the observations they've made, and when they realize something neurodiverse is happening in their relationship. And they're just awesome. Michelle and Andrew, if you may have heard of them. But anyway, I cannot wait for you guys to listen into the chat that we had and on Zoom. It's recorded a video, and we're probably going to have them on live into this Q&A at some point because they're just fantastic. So anyway, special treat for you guys next week. If you didn't see the premiere last week of my talk with Temple Grandin and her co-author Deborah Moore, it was also fantastic. We talked about visual thinking and labels and all sorts of cool stuff. So go back and watch that. And if you're curious about this Crack the Communication Code, which again, let me share my screen again here. Countdown is happening. If you're curious about it, go back and watch my YouTube live with Michelle about their marriage. It just if you look in the video list of previous slides, you can find it. And she talks about how going through this coaching group and this program has just completely turned their relationship around. And her story honestly represents what I hear from so many couples over and over again. So I really hope to see some of you guys in this coaching group that's coming up. The early bird discount is going to be ending Friday, so hop in now. And anyway, I will see you guys live again in 2 weeks, and be sure to tune in next week for the premiere of my chat with Michelle and Andrew. Okie doke. Okay, Kaylee, you're saying what days of the week will it be? On the website, I think if you scroll down the page, it's there. But it's going to be Wednesdays at 4 p.m. Eastern. And that's 6 weeks, Wednesdays, 4 p.m. Eastern. And then we'll have 2 bonus calls on Mondays during that time frame at 4 p.m. as well. And if you have any questions about it, you guys just email us. All right, Shirley, great to see you. And I'll see you guys in a couple weeks. Bye-bye.